Good evening, everyone. It's my honor and privilege as your inaugural Poet Laureate to read a poem to open the State of the City Address 2021. If the sign of a great leader is not how many followers they have, but how many leaders they create, then the proof of Jake Day's leadership can be seen in the leaders gathered here among us in this room. A leader is like a conductor who attunes the orchestra to a higher truth, and although their gifts are distinctly different, together they create a harmonious symphony. And if these leaders seek to align reality with the vision of a city where equity is achieved by acknowledging all of its city's past, proud and painful, then the evidence for all to see is at the corner of Main Street and Division. If leaders perceive the chasm between those who have and have not, and reckon the disparity, then the evidence can be seen in our schools and on our streets. If leaders know the human soul's deep need for the sublimity of art and music and beauty, and make such nourishment abundant and free, then the evidence is clear for all of us to see at the Folk Festival, parks and community gardens and galleries. Yes, evidence is everywhere in our city's dazzling successes, yet we can never see behind the scenes where a leader in their heart's private chambers listens for that inner voice to make the decisions for the greater good of those who he is pledged to lead. And like the lone traveler in Robert Frost's beautiful autumnal poem, a leader often finds themselves at two roads diverged and must choose between. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted the wear, although for passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, but knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the road less traveled by, and it has made all the difference. Thank you, City of Salisbury, for choosing the road less traveled by. It has made all the difference. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us tonight for a look back at the year that was and a preview of what's on the horizon for Salisbury in the coming 12 months and beyond. I'm City Administrator Julia Glanz, and I'm so happy to see so many smiling faces in person this evening. And for those of you joining us live on PAC 14 this evening, we're excited to bring you this year's State of the City address from Revival, a beautiful new entertainment space in downtown Salisbury. I think that does deserve some round of applause. And as we get underway tonight, I'd like to start by thanking the owners and the entire team here at Revival, as well as the crew at PAC 14 for partnering with us to bring this event to life. And of course, thank you to our Poet Laureate Nancy Mitchell, whose words never fail to move me, Nancy, the ability to paint so vividly in any medium is a wonderful gift, and when you share your art with us, you enrich an entire city. Thank you. If the Poet Laureate's job is to observe and reflect, Nancy, you've had a lot of subject matter to work with over the past couple of years. But even though the challenges we've faced during that time are the same as countless other cities and towns, Salisbury's story, isn't a typical one. With so many communities across the country still reeling from the economic and social impacts of COVID-19, how tremendously fortunate we are to be able to look back over the past year and celebrate so many victories. Just a few minutes ago, you would have watched a really great video that our Public Information Officer, Chris Simone, spent a lot of time putting together that highlighted the biggest successes of the past 12 months. It involved the Main Street ribbon cutting, opening Newton Community Center, the roundabout, highlighting our police mental health co-responder grant that we got, on and on and on. We'll probably figure out a way to play it later in the program. But in spite of every obstacle, every challenge thrown our way since the onset of the pandemic, our trajectory continues upward. This administration has maintained from day one that Salisbury has what it takes to weather COVID as well as, if not better, as any other city out there. And you would have seen that that video proved it, that that faith is merited. The fact that we have managed to not just survive, but to thrive through one of the most trying times in a generation or more is a testament to the strength and resilience of our economy, yes, but it's also a testament, and more importantly, a testament to our unbreakable spirit of this community and each and every one of you here, watching and beyond. And that feeling of being from somewhere, that sense of community, is the sum of a total of a number of different factors. It comes from having ownership in our zoo, in our beautiful new Main Street. It comes from sharing experiences like Third Friday, concerts on the river, our National Folk Festival. It comes from our shared dedication to equity and inclusion, and it comes from knowing that you're served by a local government that is productive and responsive, one that works efficiently and harmoniously towards the betterment of life for every citizen. And with that assuredness, community members feel empowered to participate by putting on events, volunteering, offering input, and suggesting improvements. To reach that level of connectedness with our citizens over the past 6 years, the city has expanded its communications efforts on every front. We've taken full advantage of social media, using varying platforms to maximize our reach. We have implemented translation services to ensure that our Korean, Haitian Creole, and Spanish-speaking residents remain informed and know that they too are represented. And we've made regular use of live streams to allow citizens to interact with city leadership directly in real time. And I don't think we could have imagined the degree to which that last one would have become such a reality and a big part of it. And I know many of us are tired of hearing about COVID, although it is still with us. I do want to highlight some of that and then hope it's the last time we all talk about it together. So in the whirlwind spring months of 2020, amidst a seamlessly endless barrage of bleak headlines, uncertainty pervaded public discussion of COVID, a situation made worse by erratic, often dangerously incorrect information from national leaders, as Salisbury took the necessary steps to ensure the health and safety of our citizens, mask mandates, occupancy limits, etc., we understood that it was equally important to utilize our platform and our reach to conduce the spread of accurate, timely information. And to quote Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer Stacy Schiff, "In the absence of facts, myth rushes in." As Marylanders began to anticipate the reality of statewide lockdown orders, Mayor Day laid out our city's COVID response communication plan. In addition to regularly scheduled press conferences, press releases, traditional radio, television, and print media interaction, we would expand our efforts through the use of readily available social media outlets and virtual meeting software, each allowing us to provide a targeted effort toward a specific area of concern. Recognizing COVID's potential economic fallout, the mayor acted to coordinate regular discussion sessions between business owners, civic organizations, community stakeholders, health agencies, and state and local governments. Conducted weekly via Zoom, the Salisbury Area Coronavirus Recovery Task Force and the Delmarva Coronavirus Recovery Task Force comprised a first-of-its-kind initiative aimed at keeping local economies healthy through the pandemic by providing a virtual space to provide relevant news and information, share successes, and collaborate on program and policy creation. These meetings have been praised by leaders across the peninsula and the state for their effectiveness as a bulwark against the economic ravages of COVID on the shore. At the same time, the mayor began to host daily briefings on Facebook. These live streams, affectionately referred to by citizens as Mayor TV, followed a strict format to ensure that relevant information was presented with as much regularity as possible. Daily hospitalization numbers were reported, as well as infection numbers, testing locations, and updates on state and local mandates. With the full-scale release of the vaccine, we began to report on vaccination rates and locations where vaccines were being administered. Each stream culminated in a question and answer session where citizens could direct their inquiries and concerns directly to the mayor or the acting mayor, or a dog or cat or two. And for much of the past year, I had the honor of holding down the fort while Mayor Day was deployed in the Horn of Africa. It was the most intensely demanding job I have ever had, and it was just as equally rewarding. Taking over those nightly streams felt daunting at first, but the support I received from this community was overwhelming. So thank you for letting me into your lives, and thank you for your trust. The weight of that responsibility was never lost on me, and I'm truly grateful to have had the opportunity to serve you in that capacity. I look forward to continuing to serve as your city administrator. So with that, I'm happy to turn things over to our current mayor and actual mayor for the annual reporting of the state of the city. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Jake Day.
Well, good evening. Julia, thank you for that warm welcome. I want to say thank you one more time to the 29th mayor of the city of Salisbury, Julia Glanz. I've looked forward to tonight for a long time, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But I want to say for our friends on PAC 14 watching at home, whether you're joining us live or catching a rebroadcast of this, thank you for tuning in. Local access television plays such an important role in terms of transparency in our community. So we're grateful for the incredible team back here at PAC 14. I also want to thank our hosts, Revival. This beautiful venue in downtown Salisbury helps cement downtown Salisbury and the Salisbury Arts and Entertainment District as the hub for arts, entertainment, and culture on the Eastern Shore. To our poet laureate, Nancy Mitchell. As Julia said so beautifully, you enrich us with your words. The lyricism and wit in your poetry are informed by a keen perceptiveness and an enthusiastic desire for deeper understanding of the people and the city that you serve. You elevate every occasion with your elegance. Thank you. Also joining us in service tonight, the men and women of the City Council. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Council members Jackson, Blake, and Gregory, thank you all for your continued service, your presence, and your representation of every single citizen of this community. We appreciate you. You know, the warm and collaborative relationship that the executive and legislative branches of government in the city of Salisbury enjoy is an example that ought to be followed in Washington, Annapolis, and all over this country. That's what local government should look like. Productive, responsive, results-driven, and most importantly, guided by the knowledge that our service is a privilege to be undertaken in equity for everyone we represent. And in that spirit of working together, we have been able to realize some of the most impactful accomplishments in our city's history. On behalf of myself and on behalf of the citizens of Salisbury, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, we thank you. And now, officially, it is my honor to report to the five of you and everybody else listening that the state of our city is strong. Just weeks ago, we celebrated another collaborative relationship as we dedicated Salisbury's new pedestrian footbridge in honor of our sister city, Tartu, Estonia. The bridge itself is symbolic of collaboration, the collaboration that brought it into being. Salisbury University has long been committed to that very collaboration that enriches its students' lives through cultural exchange. Over the past 25 years, the university has grown almost exponentially in both size and in reputation to become a top-tier, nationally ranked institution of higher learning. In 2018, the University System of Maryland announced that Dr. Chuck White had been selected to succeed Dr. Janet Dudley Eschbach as president of Salisbury University. And the first time that I ever spoke to Dr. White, I was struck by his ability to make you feel as if you'd been friends for years, even though you just met. He was affable but confident, and he exuded enthusiasm for and in his new institution. Over the next 3 years, we had the pleasure of working together in different capacities, and I've noted your affection, Dr. White, for Salisbury University and for its host city. As an omnipresent attendee of off-campus events, as a volunteer at city-sponsored events, and as a stalwart advocate for inclusivity and social equity, and as an all-around supporter of education and the arts, Chuck, you've proven that you have a stake in the success of this community and the university that you lead. Under your leadership, Salisbury University has continued to prosper. Town-gown relations are at the best they have ever been. The university has further broadened its efforts at fostering diversity and inclusivity on campus and off. Accolades and superlatives continue to roll in, further rising SU's star among its peer institutions. And the university, under Dr. White's steady guidance, mounted the single most effective COVID response in the University System of Maryland, full stop. In his time as president, Chuck has proven himself to be a worthy steward of SU's legacy. He is an enthusiastic emissary, a committed ally and advocate for his students, and an agent for positive change. You know, as we dedicated that friendship bridge the other day, and many of you in this room were there, I thought of Dr. White, who had graciously offered to host the Estonian ambassador and all of us later for an on-campus reception. I thought of the partnerships between universities that were over 2,000 miles apart, and I thought about the partnership between our city, this city, and the namesake university right on our southern border. Friendship Bridge is symbolic of those connections, but it's also a literal connector, reconnecting neighborhoods torn apart when the Camden Street Bridge was torn down many years ago. I thought about the straight shot from the front door of Holloway Hall all the way to the entrance of the Gallery building on Camden Street. Dr. Chuck White recently announced his retirement, effective at the end of the academic year. He will be sorely missed, but he won't be going far. Chuck also shared that he will continue to teach chemistry at his beloved Salisbury University. Dr. White, will you do me a favor and join me on stage? So, in honor and in recognition of that collaborative spirit, what you've given our community, and what I know you'll continue to give, we are going to rename Camden Street to Chuck White Street in the city of Salisbury. Absolutely, you can take that with you. That's yours. We'll make a different one to hang on the street, okay? And Chuck, by the way, Chuck's wife and daughter are here tonight. Chuck, I wish you a happy and healthy retirement. And I am glad, and I think I speak on behalf of all of us, that you're sticking around. So it's hard to believe that it was almost 2 years ago that I last stood before you and delivered an address as to the state of our city. Almost 2 years. You may have heard that I spent a bit of time away. It's true. Is that not a secret? Being deployed for almost a year has a way of making time feel elastic. There were moments that I found myself counting the days on a makeshift calendar, missing my girls, missing my city. Imagining that feeling of being wheels up in a C-130, feeling the tarmac slip away, and knowing the next time that my boots touched ground, I'd be home. Then occasionally I'd find myself realizing that I was only a week in, or a month in, or 2 months in, and wondering where time was going. Any soldier can tell you that the anticipation of a deployment brings with it a certain amount of anxiety, and my experience was no different from the norm. I'm not ashamed to tell you that there were a lot of tears shed one day in the office, an office that was empty thanks to COVID. And I wrote letters to my girls, to my wife, to my parents, to the citizens of Salisbury, and to Julia Glanz in case I didn't come home. And I recorded videos and put them on thumb drives in manila folders in my desk and prayed that no one would ever see them. And now I've gotten to throw them away, so no one ever will. I applaud that too, because I had like puffy eyes and I was crying. I will remember the weight of those emotions for the rest of my life. I worried about my babies missing their daddy, and I worried about how much I would miss them. I was anxious to be half a world away from my home and my family and my friends. I felt uneasy about the potential damage COVID-19 could visit upon our city in my absence, and I prayed that it wouldn't find its way to my loved ones and to your loved ones. And I watched uneasily as the nation I serve faced multiple tests of its political will and its integrity, and faced a long overdue reckoning on equality and justice. The other thing I remember is that in addition to the worry that I felt for my family, I was worried about what I was placing on my team and what I was asking of them. But because of Julia Glanz and her radical competence, my worrying disappeared like the details of the ground as my plane rose above Washington, D.C. and headed to Fort Hood, Texas. Julia is a leader of tremendous talent, unbounded compassion, unimpeachable integrity. She's strong under pressure, and she possessed an unswerving focus to do the right thing and do it decisively, no matter where public opinion lies. Under her leadership as acting mayor, the city of Salisbury continued full throttle into the pandemic that hobbled many other municipal governments. She oversaw work from home mandates that kept our staff safe, as well as those that we interact with. She took over as the voice of the city, delivering remarks on Zoom calls, hosting the Coronavirus Recovery Task Force, and taking over from Mayor TV. And she delivered comprehensive COVID-19 information to the public when it was rarely available through other sources. Julia, my simple thanks will never express how grateful I am for your impeccable work and your friendship. To say I'm honored to work with you would be a massive understatement. The city of Salisbury and I are both grateful for your leadership. Thank you. Or just wave it away. So 7,200 miles away in the sweltering heat of East Africa, I never felt a moment's pause, and I never lost a wink of sleep worrying about Salisbury because I knew it was in good hands. The trip to Camp Lemonnier was right around 30 hours. We eventually touched down in Djibouti in the Horn of Africa. This is a strategically critical spot at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait where the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean meet. I worked for a Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa. I was assigned to serve as the Special Technical Operations Chief. consume most of my time and attention. Special Technical Operations is the planning function of the sensitive activities portion of our defense and intelligence communities. Our unclassified definition is that we produce effects that conventional means cannot. And that's the only thing that we are able to share about that field. I was also, however, the Deputy Director of Information Operations, which meant that I planned and synthesized civil military operations, psychological operations, cyber operations, military deception, electronic warfare, public affairs, and key leader engagement. In Djibouti, I focused on civil affairs, cyber defense, and psychological operations. A lot of that was like being back at the helm as mayor again. I spent a lot of time with local officials, assisting them with addressing their needs. I shared things with them from back home like flags of the city of Salisbury and coins and pins. And I have to tell you, I was a little worried about an Old Bay shortage. People sent it to me by the pound. And, you know, it filled my clue. Old Bay in my rucksack, Old Bay under my rack. They called me Jake Bay, walking around the countryside with little yellow cans of crab seasoning. They didn't call me. While most people were confined to the base, given the COVID environment, I was fortunate, given my job, that I got to go out frequently. The country has a volcanic, mountainous landscape. It's otherworldly. It's hot, 90 to 120 degrees every day, most days. Djibouti's economy is essentially built around being a landlord for the world's militaries, so poverty is extreme. But in spite of this, the Djiboutian people are welcoming, kind, and highly resistant to Islamist extremism, and very receptive to Old Bay. It's true. So the other major facet of my work was in northeast Kenya and South Somalia, and these areas are essentially no man's land, run by al-Shabaab. The governments in Kenya and Somalia are not present in these areas. So after the 2020 attacks on Camp Simba in Manda Bay, Kenya, and on Baladogle military airfield in Somalia, and with the withdrawals of troops in Somalia and Afghanistan, things are very much in flux. For months, I planned and sought approval for an operation in these areas that I wanted to execute. It would be a major leap for our task force. Once approved, I was fortunate enough to lead the team that would execute it. So for February and March 2021, I led a small team across Kenya, enjoying the rare privilege of witnessing some of the world's most elite fighting forces as they prepared for and conducted operations, sensitive operations against our adversaries. On a Thursday night in April, though, just days before I boarded our flight back to America, I sat on the floor of Camille Muhammad's house. This is my friend. This was a rarity. As far as I know, there was only one group of Americans that got to do this while I was there, thanks to COVID. And it was like nothing I'd tasted the entire time in Africa. This is not like galley food or DFAC food. We ate dates and bananas and oranges, fish and rice, sweets made of I don't know what. It was the iftar, the breaking of the fast during Ramadan. And he had brought me outside of our blast walls and outside of our razor wire, past the serpentine gates and through a city to his house with his wife and his one-year-old daughter to share his food and his hospitality and his religion with me. And that evening of shared humanity carried me closer to home faster than the 737 I would board a few days later. As I put mile after mile behind me, closing the distance to home, I became giddy with the anticipation of seeing my family. Hugging those girls tight after being away for so long was the single greatest feeling that I have ever known. If I live to be 120 years old, I don't think I'll ever experience joy like that again. Thankfully, that moment was caught on video, and I don't know if we can hear the voice, but if you can hear my voice and what I say, I think it says everything that my words can't. I don't know if we've got the audio, but you'll see the picture. I don't think it's possible for a human heart to be any fuller than it was in that moment. Still, I'm thankful for the experience of the deployment. I'm glad to be back, renewed sense of purpose, and a backpack full of Old Bay. It's true. But believe me when I tell you, the love and support that I felt from this city while I was gone and when I returned is something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I'll never forget how good you were to me, how good you were to Liz, how good you were to the girls. And I will never forget that throughout that duration of the deployment, and once I was back and you threw your arms open wide to me, the love that this city showed to me. So thank you to every single one of you. And the Salisbury that I came home to looks like this now. A gorgeous Main Street, fully open, finally bringing traffic into downtown rather than shooing it out. Beautiful brickwork, new landscaping, benches, sculpted street lamps. The Adkins obelisk, golden in the sunset, marking the spot where the headwaters of the Wicomico converge. Steps from where a sign not long ago celebrated a slave master. We soon planted an unavoidable testament to our unwillingness to ever repeat the mistakes of the past. I came home to a city full of life. I came home to a city full of life, full of vigor, undimmed by the pandemic, and still on the rise. Getting our community back to work was mostly about catching on to the rhythm again. I had to be brought up to speed. And if I can make an analogy, it's kind of like watching your favorite TV show, binge watching it, and having to turn it off right in the middle of, the second season and having to go to Djibouti, hypothetically. It was like that. So there was some catching up to do. So my first appointments were with our city leaders, the department heads, our fire chief, our police chief. By itself, the pandemic represents a monumental challenges, but challenges have a way of compounding. Each does not care about the challenge you are already facing. COVID doesn't care about call volume. It doesn't care about your overtime budget. Crime still happens. Car accidents still happen. House fires still happen. But keeping ourselves on track, maintaining the pace that we've established, the vigorous pace that we've established over the last few years, means seeing the forest and the trees. It means keeping the larger picture in focus through the blur of calamity. Over the past year, our fire and police services have celebrated some significant victories in spite of challenges. And I'd like to bring our police chief and our fire chief to the stage now to talk about them. Let's hear it for these leaders of the men and women on our front lines. Chiefs. I hope everyone in the room knows, can everyone hear me okay? All right. I hope everyone in the room knows Chief Barbara Duncan and Chief John Tull. What did you do? So, I'm going to start with Chief Tull. So, Chief, your team tracks a number of critical metrics, things that are indicators of how well we're doing, how well we're performing. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what some of those things that you measure and watch are?
Certainly. So for us, data is the key to making good decisions. Right? This data that we collect through our metrics, they help us with our deployment of our resources. They ensure our efficient and effective delivery of those resources to ensure that we are delivering the highest level of services to the citizens. Most of our metrics come from national standards. So through the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, and also mandated through established law like OSHA. So some of the things that we track specifically is total number of incidents. We look at time of day and day of the week. That helps us determine when to apply additional resources in service. Years ago, we used to look at the city, and we could always say there were going to be certain times when call volume was going to be low. And that was after hours and on weekends, because we would have people that came into the city to work, and then they would leave the city, and then call volume would go down. Well, today that is not the case. The call volume stays the same Sunday through Saturday, 24 hours a day. There is no decrease in call volume anymore. We look at call location. We specifically look at call location to determine are our apparatus in the right spot, are our buildings or stations geographically located to where the calls are happening. We look at types of calls, because types of calls help determine the resources that we need to have, and it also allows us to look for trending. Are there certain types of calls that are happening all the time that we can then apply additional resources? We can look at it through our fire marshal's office to determine, is there some root cause of spike in kitchen fires? Is there a message that we can get out to the public to help reduce those types of calls? Are we seeing juveniles involved in more calls, from juveniles with matches to playing with lighters and fires and that kind of stuff? We do a lot of metrics with tracking our training, because to be an effective fire department, we have to train every day. We have to make sure that we hone our skills to, again, provide the highest level of service possible to the citizen. And then we look at things specifically like fire calls. We want to make sure, what does our travel time look like? Are we in the right spot? Are we getting to the scene quickly to make sure that we can mitigate the incident? When we talk about fires, we want to make sure that, are we getting the right units and the right number of people on the scene to effectively manage that fire. And with that, by having the right amount of people on the scene, the right equipment, it allows us to contain the fire to hopefully the room of origin, to reduce fire loss, save citizens' personal belongings. You know, if we can save that one photograph, that could mean everything to that person that's just suffered this horrific loss at their fire or their house. EMS calls, we look at arrival time of our BLS or ALS crew, because again, we want to make sure that we have the right people on the scene to provide the right level of care to that patient that suffered some type of medical or trauma-related event. We look at cardiac arrest. We measure that because we want to see how we can improve the return of spontaneous circulation to someone who's had this cardiac arrest. And we employ different techniques, different equipment to enhance that return of spontaneous circulation. We look at things like IV access rate. All of our providers, we measure their success rate. And if we see them trending in the wrong direction, well, then we provide remedial training to them to make sure that they're going to have a high success rate. We look at medication dosage. Are we arriving on the scene quick? Are we determining what's wrong with the patient, what medicines they need, and are we getting the medicine to them quick to help with whatever the event is? We look at our on-scene time because we want to make sure that critical patients, people that are suffering from strokes, people that are having some cardiac-related event, right? We can only do so much in the field. Definitive care is what they need. So they need to be at a hospital facility where they can get the right med. They can get to the cath lab for this heart attack or whatever, and for trauma. And then with cardiac arrest, we also look at the onset of CPR. Did we recognize what it was? Did we start compressions? And then the rate and ventilation of our compressions and ventilations, and then access to defibrillation, because that is the key to survivability with someone that's in cardiac arrest. And then a few other things that we look at, especially with our fire marshal's office, because public safety is huge for us, it's response to complaints. And that's either internally driven, so we're out on a scene, we see something that may be a life safety issue, they report it, fire marshal's division follows up on it, or a complaint from a citizen who sees something, calls in. So we want to make sure we address those within 48 hours. Right? We want to make sure things are safe. We want to look at fire code violations. We want to address those, give people time to make the corrections. And then the inspection of all city hotels and motels, all city restaurants, food trucks. We monitor that. And then to make sure that we have safe fire suppression systems, alarm systems, all that is regularly tested. So those are some of the things. I know it's a lot of metrics that we constantly monitor.
So Chief, pardon the pun, but you've got your finger on the pulse of fire protection and emergency medical services in the city. So over a year like the last year that we've had, what are the trends that concern you, or what are we seeing?
What are we seeing? So trends that we see is that you have a very busy fire department. Over this last 3 quarters of this year, we have seen over an 8% increase in call volume. So again, every day we are a busy fire department. Just in August, we broke the all-time record for the number of EMS calls in a single month was 1,009 EMS calls. So again, steady. So what does that equate to? That means on average every day, we receive 44 calls for service. So every 33 minutes, the fire department receives a call to go help someone in our community. With that, and with COVID, we've seen an increase in our committed times now. What once pre-COVID was we received an ambulance call 50 minutes from the time of dispatch to we were back in service, ready to handle the next call. Now that has increased to about an hour and 20 minutes that we're committed. So a single unit is now committed because of delays at the hospital because they don't have beds available. We got to stay with the patient. The extra precautions that we have to take now with deconning our units. So it keeps that unit out of service longer, which puts higher demands on other units. And quite often, we are out of units and we have to rely on mutual aid from county departments to come into the city to help pick up some of our increased call loading.
So Chief, knowing that doesn't just drive operational decision making, right? I mean, it also enables you to argue for resources. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of resources this information, knowing the trends, has enabled for you?
So when we look at this kind of stuff and know the call volume, this allows us to apply for grants for staffing. As you're aware, I mean, in 2018, we were a recipient of a SAFER grant, and I know we'll talk about that in a little bit.
What is that? Can you?
So the SAFER grant is a grant that's through FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the Department of Homeland Security, that is specifically designed for staffing. So it's the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response. And that is federal money that is awarded to fire departments that show a need for increased staffing because our call volume exceeds our ability to provide a service to our community. So with that grant in 2018, we were afforded 12 additional personnel to help supplement our staffing, which allowed us to do several things with staffing of equipment, stations, and all that good stuff. Also, we have seen increased, some improvements in our travel time because of the SAFER grant and having all of our stations open and equipment in the right spots. We have seen some improvements to our travel. Unfortunately, we're busy, the city's busy. So when we have calls specifically on the north end of Salisbury, right, there is a delay for us getting there. So we can only achieve so much with traffic and travel distance to meet our metrics. We've seen the significance with SAFER was displayed in our ability to get the right amount of people and the right equipment on working fires. Right? Over the last 2.5 years, we achieved 100% in that benchmarking every month since the implementation of that SAFER grant. So in March of 2019 to now, 100% of getting the right number of people and the right equipment on the scene. So huge impact in our department. We've also seen a reduction in frequent 911 callers and ER abuse through the implementation of our SWIFT program, which is just a phenomenal program.
That SWIFT is?
Salisbury Wycomico Integrated First Care Team. And it's a phenomenal program. And then we've seen increased fire marshal services to include plan review, inspection, just because of the boom in the city of construction with residential apartments and commercial buildings. So again, everything trends high for us.
And so from a staffing standpoint, you've benefited a lot from these grant monies. But what's on the horizon? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Specific grants, what's on the horizon? So what's on the horizon for us is another SAFER grant. We were notified about 2 months ago that we have received another grant
How much money does that save the taxpayers?
$2.7 million.
One more time?
$2.7 million.
Okay. Well,
2.7 to hire 12 additional personnel, which will be used to place a peak demand EMS unit in service. So now, during the day, when we're the busiest, we will have 4 EMS units in service, and to help with our full-time equivalents, because what happens now is our minimum staffing is just enough to keep our current units in service. So when we feel the impact of COVID isolation, COVID quarantines, family medical leave, workers' comp, injuries, our overtime has to absorb all those vacancies. So with this, in this new grant, we're going to have the opportunity to put 12 new personnel in service, and that'll go into effect late February of 22.
well, congratulations, Chief.
Thank you.
So, Chief Duncan, you have also pursued some grant funding in the past year and have been the beneficiary of that. One of the ones that people may have heard about was the Target U.S. Conference of Mayors grant. Can you talk a little bit about what that enables for the Salisbury Police Department?
Absolutely. So we were able to secure the top amount of funding in the tier in which we applied, which was $75,000. Our proposal involved a co-responder model where a police officer and a social worker respond out to the scene of an individual struggling under the umbrella of behavioral health. So it could be a mental health crisis, it could be a behavioral health crisis, but the important piece of that is that we're going to be going out in a team mentality to try to provide services to an individual in crisis. So this provides us the ability to respond to this particular type of situation involving potential mental health issues in a way that possibly avoids treating it as a law enforcement issue, which is phenomenal. In addition to that, some of the grant monies that we received will be carved out for training for both the social worker and the police officers who are going to be working together on this team so that they can provide the best services possible. So after we roll this model out for a year, we'll be looking at all the data that we collect, hopefully coming up with a report for you, Mr. Mayor, to decide what direction to take our city in next.
Now, Chief, this is not the first time that the City of Salisbury has engaged in a co-responder model or in addressing mental health needs. Chief Toll, you mentioned the Salisbury-Wicomico Integrated First Care Team, SWIFT, which is a mobile integrated healthcare program. Can you talk a little bit about how that program has addressed things like mental health and some of the other challenges that our co-response model has faced as they've been out there in the community?
Absolutely. So what started in 2017 was this idea of this concept of being mobile integrated healthcare. And it truly has become a remarkable program. This program is designed to address those chronic and frequent 911 abuse and non-emergency ER visits. So our SWIFT team has worked tirelessly this past year to protect the most vulnerable population, okay? We have this mobile team aimed at delivering a high level of service directly to the patient's home, so they don't have to leave their house to get some type of treatment. Through Title Health and numerous partnerships with other agencies in the community, we've been able to implement a telehealth program where a Salisbury paramedic and a nurse practitioner from Title Health get in one of our vehicles and they go directly to the homes of these individuals. So for us, it's about bringing the right care to the right patient at the right time. And this program has had a significant impact on the population of this community. So some of the things that we've done, SWIFT, over this past year and a half, 227 patients have been enrolled in the program. So we're managing and monitoring these people. We are making sure that they get their medicine. The nurse practitioner will write scripts right there at their house. We make sure that they can get from their home to their primary care for a doctor's appointment by providing taxi vouchers. So someone can come pick them up, both ambulatory, so someone's walking, and wheelchair vans if they're in a wheelchair, to make sure that they can get the treatment that they need instead of calling 911, going to the hospital just to be seen and then going back home.
Chief. I just have to ask, when you started your career, did you ever imagine that this would be something that the fire service would be engaged in?
No, not at all. Not at all. And this came to life because of the passion of a few individuals in our department. Firefighter paramedic David Phippen is the person behind this whole program. It was his idea to, as years of riding on the ambulance, he knew that more could be done for these people. Some of these people, they just want someone to talk to. And they were calling 911 just to get an EMS unit there so they could have someone to talk to. So now, David and his group of people, they are checking on these people every day. They make sure they have everything they need. They stop by just to say hi sometimes, so those people know that they're not forgotten.
You can see there's a lot to be proud of in terms of the services that are provided, even services that are a departure from the norm. One of the things that I'm frequently proud of is the trends in crime in our community. And Chief Duncan, I often point out that there is a pretty close alignment with your arrival and the reduction in crime faced by the citizens of our community. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that trend looked like during COVID?
Absolutely. In COVID, we found that our crime shifted, certainly, and actually trended down even more than it had in 2019. So I think that it was, in looking at what the officers were doing and talking to the officers and talking to community members, I think we can all agree that the different type of relationship that our officers worked on having with community members during COVID had somewhat of an impact on what we're seeing with our crime. There were some other things, which I can get into a little later, but we had been working on relationships all along, and it really came out during COVID just how much our community relies on us and we rely on them to work collaboratively to make our way through that particular time period in our city's history.
So we have seen now 7 straight years and an overall approximately 12-year trend of declining crime rates, but 7 straight years of total Part 1 crimes in our city declining. Do you see that trend continuing? If so, what else do you see changing in the years ahead?
Well, I do see it continuing, actually, because it's not just a police department issue and it's not just a neighborhood issue. The way that we're approaching crime is through relationships. So the mentoring programs that we have at our elementary schools, our Citizens Police Academy, even the Criminal Justice Reform Task Force, the close and difficult conversations that our police officers are having with community members about race, talking to neighbors about how crime is generated within their community, within their neighborhood, and also using the various diversion programs that are now coming online really help to make sure that that trend continues.
So, Chief, you just mentioned a number of things that I think are indicative of the trust-building approach that you've taken, which include Police Athletic League, it includes community-oriented policing, it includes the mentoring in the schools, but that Criminal Justice Reform Task Force, let's talk about that for a second. One of the things that they did recently was they held a public listening session. Mm-hmm. That offered an opportunity for some discussion among leadership of Salisbury Police Department and citizens about how they were policed or what they felt some of the national issues around policing and how were affecting our community. What's your takeaway from that work, that task force's work, and that particular type of engagement, that sort of public forum?
Sure. So we definitely learned, especially in that forum, that national issues land locally. I mean, it's just plain and simple. So we didn't turn our ears or our hearts away from that at all. And we looked at ourselves and realized how important trust and accountability and transparency and cooperative work remains. For that particular listening session that was held by the task force, some of the specific takeaways were, one, we have a tremendous amount of solid, caring, empathetic officers who stand up and decide every single day to continue in service to others here for the city of Salisbury. They made that loud and clear. I also heard the importance of continued collaborative efforts and great interest in remaining a participatory part of this community. So in other words, our residents were incredibly interested in learning more about the police department and then engaging with them to make sure that we are the best police department, period.
So this question is for both of you. Final question. With all that we've discussed tonight, what do you see ahead in the next year? What does the next 12 months look like for each of your agencies?
We are going to continue to look with the help of our community partners and our city partners as well, because we've done great work. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the collaborative work we do with Team Red, with our fire department brothers and sisters, with housing and neighborhood services, with field ops. These are things that our officers are connecting our community members to every single day. They are familiar with the resources, and they make sure that if, as a generalist, when they show up on a call for service, if they don't have a particular skill set, they continue to reach out to their partners in other agencies within the city. Additionally, we are committed to focusing on officer wellness, on the internal aspect of our agency, to make sure that those individuals that we're asking the very difficult questions of are as sound as they can be and can continue to show up every day, to walk away from their families, show up every day, and to provide the needed services for our community. We are very interested in taking a look at, a deep look, an analysis, if you will, of what we're producing as an agency and whether or not it's effective. So we're getting into an area where we're going to need some assistance from a consultant, an analyst, who can come and take a look at our numbers. And if we're doing things right, that's great. We'd be happy to share that model with anyone who believes they could benefit from it. And if there are areas where we can improve, we want to know that as well as your police department, and we want to make those improvements. Yes, sir.
So things that are on the horizon. Well, the first is the implementation of that peak EMS demand unit, right? Because it's critical to our success. Capital items, replacement of an aging rescue truck.
Wow, you got me on stage and hit me with the rescue
Look at
truck. Smart man.
Like our partners in Blue, behavioral health, and continuing our enhancement of our behavioral health and our peer support services to our members that are struggling every day with the demands of the job and the traumatic stress that we see every day. We want to continue with the SWIFT program. All right, our vision is an expansion of that. That will help even more people, maybe not directly located within the city, but surrounding communities around the city to help in their time of need and all that. And then programs like the Junior Fire Academy, right, our cadet program, because that's our vessel to recruitment and retention of our volunteers. And by having those programs in place allows us to get them at an early age, and if we can hook them and keep them interested in the fire service, as they attend our summer camps, they hit high school, they become the cadet, They stay with us through high school, and then they become full members. Right? We reap the benefits of that service, and it enhances their volunteer membership. With COVID, we've seen a reduction in our ability to be out in the community with any recruitment efforts. So we're really looking forward to seeing things open back up, seeing events take place, that we can be out in the public, one, talking about the fire service, talking about the job we do, and then recruiting people to come into the city.
So if you didn't know it before, you know it now, that the men and women who put their lives on the line to keep us safe every single day have fantastic leadership. Let's hear it for the chief.
So, the data that the chiefs just shared with us, that's data that's tracked and compiled as part of our Result SBY performance management system. Every department within the city of Salisbury tracks data on a number of metrics that are relevant to the functions of the department, and that information is made available to the public through our new Open Data Hub. This is information, these are metrics that are also adopted by our city council into law. You can find it on our website at www.salisbury.md. Click on the menu button in the top right corner, navigate to the Information Services page. Right there in our GIS portal is an Open Data Hub, and this is more than another component of our transparency efforts. It's a resource unlike anything else the city's ever provided. So I think we had a video, but I'm not going to try to play that. What I want you to know is here you can find information about our planning efforts, information about our sidewalks, information about, and I mean the condition of our streets, sidewalks, where it's complete, where it's incomplete, where there's gaps, everything that you can imagine. Business permits, you name it, development, construction. This is GIS data at the front door portal for a business that wants to be in Salisbury, a person that wants to move to Salisbury, someone looking to invest in our community. And if you see something that's amiss, something maybe we've forgotten, something we didn't pay attention to, a pothole or a downed wire, a streetlight or a broken window, we have another tool now, Citizen Reporter. This is a link available at the top of the city website. And this not only let us know about what we've missed as our eyes and ears, but it also lets you live track how we're handling it. Who's taking care of it, who's fixing it, and how quickly they're fixing it. That data is all kept up to date by our information services team, specifically our GIS specialists, and they monitor all sorts of things, including 91 infrastructure projects that are in progress right now. We don't anticipate a shortage of new data for them to crunch anytime soon. So I want to say that again, 91 infrastructure projects under development in the city right now. That's more than we've ever had going at any one time. And with so much in the pipeline, you can expect to see a steady rhythm of maintenance and upgrades that we've established to continue and to pick up in the year to come and beyond. The fact that we have not only kept pace, but hastened our progress in the face of COVID and the COVID-related challenges is a testament to the strength and resilience of our city, the efficacy and efficiency of our government, and the impeccable work of our infrastructure and development department under the director, Amanda Pollock. Past 12 months have seen the completion of some of the most ambitious and transformative infrastructure projects in our city's history. And I have a treat for you. You're going to get another person on stage, and that is Amanda Pollock, Director of Infrastructure and Development. This saves people from having to hear from me. Come on up, Amanda. How are you? Absolutely, absolutely. So, Amanda, I want to start off with the big stuff. Everybody who came here tonight likely came down Main Street. So, Main Street was a major project. It cost a lot of money. Can you talk to us about what that project felt like to wrap a bow?
Sure, yeah, well, it was an adventure. It spanned 7 fiscal years, as the council knows well, and it cost a total of $12.5 million. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot in the first phases when we hit soil contamination, and we learned a lot on the plaza phase, West Main Street. But I'm really proud of how it came out. There was a lot of adventures, as I said. So the intersection of North Division and Main Street, it was a good thing you were going for that. So that was 8 weeks of fun. We encountered so many unforeseen obstacles there. We had a sandwich of a storm drain with a gas main and a water main all touching each other. So that was a ticking time bomb. So there was a lot of things that we had to be really careful with. But Main Street had success because we learned from the earlier phases, and for that last phase, we tried a totally different procurement tool. So we bid that as a time and materials contract, and that helped mitigate the risk. It helped mitigate the cost overruns and let us keep it under budget, because essentially we told the contractor, we're sharing in the risk here. So whatever you find, we're going to pay you for, it just needs to get done right. So that took all the arguing out, and it actually resulted in a massive credit at the end of that job. We came in under budget on that phase, and the entire project came in $2 million under budget.
Say that one more time.
$2 million.
So $12.5 million. Can you talk to us about $12.5 million? Where does that come from?
Where did that come from? Sure. Well, we received $2.5 million from the state of Maryland for Salisbury revitalization, and $2 million of that went to Main Street. $500,000 went to the amphitheater, and the rest to Main Street. So that was enormous in itself. We also received a grant from the DHCD for Community Legacy for the streetlights. We received, that was about $100,000. We received $200,000 from Maryland Broadband to help put in the broadband infrastructure. We received a $75,000 grant from the Green Streets program through Chesapeake Bay Trust, which I'm very proud of. And then we had $10.1 million of municipal bonds. So it was a lot of different sources, but we were 20% grant funded, which is quite remarkable for a project of that size.
You'd say rare?
Very rare, yes.
Very rare. So we're obviously grateful to all those funding sources, Governor Hogan, DHCD, and others. A lot of other projects happened during the same period of time. I showed a few of them earlier, and we've got a couple of them up here. Can you talk about some of the other big wins over the last year?
Sure. Well, so Riverside Circle was a little bit longer than a year ago, but I have to talk about that. So,
Please.
and really the obelisk itself, which you remarked about earlier.
Tell the story, by all means.
Do you want me to admit here on stage that I was wrong and you were right?
No, I don't want you to do that.
Well, you were right. I love the obelisk in its new home, but that was an adventure in itself. There were no plans that showed us what the foundation of the obelisk was. So when we were trying to remove it from Main Street, we had to figure out what exactly was holding it up, how do we move it, and then how do we support it in its new location, because it's not leaning. It is actually installed level, even though it looks like it's leaning, and there's a huge foundation under it to support it. So that was a fun adventure. But Riverside Circle is a project that actually benefited from having some of the construction during the pandemic, because there was much less traffic. And part of what was difficult with that project was just the maintenance of traffic during construction. That was half of the plan set, was each phase of maintenance of traffic. So like Main Street, having less people walking around kind of helped those construction crews. And it is quite remarkable that construction did not stop during COVID. We didn't miss a beat. Really, again, a nod to those construction companies that kept their staff out there, our inspectors and the teams we had working for us. So that's one big one. There are two water and wastewater projects that I want to name that were huge. And first I'll acknowledge the Director of Waterworks, Corey Cameron, is here tonight.
She is.
So one of the projects is the Gordy Road water main. And most people probably don't really know what that was. Gordy Road is mostly a county road. Well, that was a 24-inch water main that we installed. Most of the water, the drinking water for the city of Salisbury, is from our Paleo water plant, which is on the north end of town. And there was only one main line that connected that to the main part of town. So with the construction of this 24-inch water main, we now have redundancy. So we have another way for that water to get to the main part of town. So that was a huge project in itself, and that's recently completed. And then also the Fitzwater Pumping Station project. And I'll also say that Art Jones, our maintenance chief, is here tonight. And Art Art knows our 50 pump stations like the back of his hand, and Fitzwater was always a challenging one because that pump station was located in Fitzwater Street, literally in the street. The lid was in the street, and we all know that that road floods. So
we can call that underwater, not just underground.
It was underwater a lot, and it's a difficult station. It serves Purdue, and it's one of our most critical pump stations. So that has been totally rebuilt. It's been taken out of the floodplain and built on higher land. So that project was completed. And another thing with the Fitzwater project, we learned from Main Street when we hit soil contamination. We knew we were going to have soil contamination at Fitzwater, so we switched gears. Instead of digging up the old sewer mains, we lined them. We did things trenchless, so we didn't have to deal with the soil contamination. So we pivoted after dealing with it on Main Street.
And that allowed us to keep the street open more
Yes,
of the project, right?
Definitely, yeah. It allowed us to keep traffic moving and less inconvenience. Even though there was inconvenience, it was less inconvenience.
So Amanda, behind you is a picture of the Riverside Circle. And in the previous image of this circle, there was an aerial shot kind of right over, overhead. So in this image, I can count at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 7 capital projects that the city has undertaken just in the last 5 years or so. There's so much happening right in that area, from the edible garden to the bark park. I mean, can you talk about just some of the cool things that have happened right there?
Yeah, well, you named 2 that are small projects, but one that we're really proud of. The edible garden, we received a grant from the Coastal Association of Realtors, and we have a public garden downtown that's filled with strawberries and blueberries and herbs and fig trees, and anyone is welcome to go and weed or pick things and eat it. So we built 3 of the 4 beds. We wanted to wait on the 4th bed until the bridge construction was done. There's a bench. We're about to install another bench and a nice sign. So that's one project. The Bark Park is across the river, and that's now open, and that was also with a grant and a partnership with Barry Van Ness. So that was fun. Of course, the Camden Pedestrian Bridge, as you mentioned earlier. Yes, so that we recently had the ribbon cutting. We are wrapping up work. The deck has been poured, and we're about to install railings. So that
Went in today.
Oh, good.
I saw it today. Railing is in.
Good. So that's about to open to the public, and that'll be done soon.
Good. So Amanda, a lot of big projects completed this year. What does the next year look like?
So still have a lot of big projects. As you said, 91 infrastructure projects, and no shortage of things to do. With the bridge finishing, next we'll turn our sights to Carroll Street. And Carroll Street is getting a major road diet. We are putting in a 2-way cycle track on one side of Carroll Street. We're narrowing the lanes. If you saw from the circle, there's that unfinished piece. Well, that's telling you that something's to come, and it's Carroll Street. So we're almost done design. We've received some grants. Chesapeake Bay Trust is another one that we received that grant for Carroll, and we will be putting that out to bid soon. Then in downtown, we are going to do St. Peter's Street. And when I said we had $2 million left over for Main Street, we reallocated that to a number of different projects, but we saved a little bit of money for St. Peter's. Because once Main Street was done, we realized St. Peter's is kind of sticking out, and it needs to match the rest of Main Street. So you will see construction happening soon. We're replacing the water main there first, and then the topside improvements will happen very soon. We are also working on Town Square Phase 2. Town Square Phase 1 is the food truck pad that's next to the parking garage. And Town Square Phase 2 is essentially going to be the city's living room, right? That's going to be our new comfortable hangout place.
Perfect way to put it.
So we are working through the design. We have a design charrette coming up in November, and we're really excited. I wish I could show, but I'm not going to show. That'll be next year. We'll talk about how that one's going to look, but that's coming soon. We also are continuing with our bikeways and the rail trail. And we were just recently awarded $700,000 from 2 different grants for bikeways projects and the rail trail projects. So very excited about that.
We talk about how proud we are of our team, but I hope tonight you have all sensed how amazing the team is that is serving the citizens of Salisbury every single day. So Amanda, thank you.
So our infrastructure investments, they take many forms. And some are easier to see than others. Every dollar spent in, on, or above ground represents a payment. But not just a payment for infrastructure, but a payment toward our shared prosperity. Beyond necessary upkeep and maintenance, and beyond the betterment of life for our citizens, through the expansion of recreational opportunities, increased mobility options, smoother streets and cleaner water, Beyond their face value, inherently, every one of these projects, no matter the type or scope, enhances our ability to attract families and businesses to call this place home. By staying focused on maintaining our rhythm and thinking creatively and holistically in our COVID response, Salisbury did the work to keep its economic engine strong over the past 18 months, ensuring that we could continue to find ourselves in the enviable position we do right now. In case you're wondering what that looked like, it looked like $125 million in construction in our city since the first COVID case hit Salisbury. $125 million in construction. Just so you know, that's a record for 15 months. And to ensure our most ambitious and transformative projects would come to fruition, we created something called the Horizon Zone, Hotel or Residential Tax Incentive Zone. And that's a tax incentive, and it's aimed at accelerating the construction of multifamily and hotel projects. It offers a stepped real estate property tax benefit similar to the one that commercial development benefits from today. This is a program that required the review and passage of the Maryland General Assembly, the Wycomico County Council, and the City Council. A significant effort. And that project, that initiative was worthwhile, and the proof is in the pudding. It kickstarted projects that were waylaid temporarily by the pandemic. It worked. Today, for the first time since I was born, concrete is being poured in a new private building in our downtown, which is amazing to say. Since 1982, first new private building to be built in our downtown. There are piles being driven into the dirt at Main and Baptist. The two tallest buildings in our city are under construction tonight. Look no further than the upper floors of buildings up and down Main Street. The old White and Leonard, the old Seasons Best, the old Hannon building, all new apartments under construction. Or how about the old Vernon Powell building, filled with professionals? More housing can't come fast enough. One of the most alarming challenges of the past year is the increasingly severe and multifaceted nationwide housing crisis. With both demand and supply at historic extremes, the median home price has soared in communities across the country. Harvard research has found that nearly half of all renters are cost burdened, and there is not a single state, metropolitan area, or county in the United States of America where a worker earning minimum wage can afford an average rent on 40 hours a week. Compounding matters, the expiration of those protections for evictions during the COVID era have come to an end. And Salisbury is not immune to these challenges. In fact, as the epicenter of population growth from 2010 to 2020 for the entire eastern shore of Maryland, the impact of the housing crisis is felt more acutely here. As our national profile continues to rise, as employers in Salisbury add jobs at a time when other markets are watching them disappear, as more and more people discover this place and call this city home, waiting around for a market correction is not an option that we have. As our citizens face a looming eviction crisis, as a person working 2 or 3 jobs searches listing after listing on website after website, hoping to find an affordable home, and as a fellow Salisburian spends the night in the cold, inaction is not an option. Last month, Salisbury decided to move decisively forward to meet those challenges head on with our Here is Home program. This will increase the supply of available housing stock in Salisbury, incentivizing new construction, waiving all construction fees. That means as long as they stay on schedule and are under construction in no more than 2 years from the date of application, qualifying developments will pay $0 to the city of Salisbury in fees. To increase the amount of affordable housing in Salisbury, Here is Home offers a payment in lieu of taxes for affordable housing and a tax break for Salisbury Neighborhood Housing's homes and Habitat for Humanity of Wycomico County's homes, the leaders of which are both here tonight. Let's hear it for them. This will make the difference between affordable housing units coming online and not in our community. And to better assist our homeless population, Here is Home aims to expand housing options by identifying new progressive solutions and seeking out and fostering new partnerships with community organizations and healthcare providers and advocacy groups. And to provide the best chance at leaving homelessness behind, Here is Home program includes the construction of Christine Chestnut's dream, a tiny home village with showers and bathrooms and mail and storage facilities. This is the first of its kind on the Eastern Shore of Maryland in our efforts to end homelessness in Salisbury. You know, we might be the city where all of the population growth on the Eastern Shore of Maryland took place from 2010 to 2020. Our housing stock might have skyrocketed overnight. We may be the #1 city where people are moving to from the Baltimore and Washington metro areas. But if we are not also the city that wraps a blanket around a shivering man, have we really accomplished anything? I believe not. I believe not. It's in that spirit that we also, in 2015, said we're going to change the course of direction for our youngest citizens. And by 2017, we had purchased 306 Newton Street, a large unoccupied structure, formerly a single-family home. I think we could call this Martin Hutchinson's dream. This building had become an attractive nuisance in the Camden neighborhood. When we took ownership of it, it was gutted on the inside, filled with trash. It needed a new roof. There was fire damage, water damage, but it was filled with unlimited potential. Over the next few years, we took about the work of rehabbing it, and this past June, we officially opened the Newton Street Community Center in North Camden. Once a liability to the neighborhood where it stands, the house at Newton and Light Street breathes new life and creates opportunity for the next generation of Salisburyans. Those Salisburyans will mature in a Salisbury that is adding jobs in defense and communications manufacturing, in shipbuilding, in medicine, in life sciences. Our workforce is at its largest point in history, and we continue to be short on workers. At each of the 2 opportunity projects hosted by the Greater Salisbury Committee and their partners, the theme has been that people want to move here, that there's opportunity here, so long as we can house them. After all, this is a city that welcomes them with open arms, and in whatever language they speak. This is the city that arm in arm sings along with them, all 91,000 of them. This is the city that knows how to throw a party and knows how to do it on a national stage. This moment is our still point of clarity in a moving world. So tonight, as we take inventory of our achievements over the past year, we do so with the somber knowledge that in less than 2 years, 750,000 Americans have lost their lives to an invisible enemy. And even though the light human ingenuity has brought us with a vaccine that's proven safe and effective, the rancorous politicization of even the simplest public health actions continues to put Americans at risk. It's a moment that demands action because we're the ones who made it possible. Right now, across the country, countless cities and towns find themselves worse off than they did at the beginning of the pandemic. The fact that we are uniquely positioned to thrive at a time like this is due in no small part to the momentum that we have built over a decade of rebirth in community spirit. We owe it to ourselves to make the most of this extraordinary advantage, to capitalize on the opportunity that you all created. That's not to say that we've reached a point of criticality. Our progress is very much still dependent upon our own effort, and it's always going to be. So while we can and should celebrate our victories, we can't allow ourselves to be complacent in them. Recognizing that we are the masters of our own fate, and that the sweat we put in is directly proportional to our future, the future we know we can create for ourselves. Now's the moment for us to redouble our efforts to make Salisbury safer and more vibrant and more walkable and more bikeable and more beautiful and more cultural and more prosperous than she has ever been before. This moment is a point of demarcation between what we thought we could do and what we know we can do. We come together tonight in a city of our own making, no longer impeded by the notion that our future is out of our control. The challenges that we faced then, they were no more immutable than the challenges we face now. And in fact, some of them we still face. But now we know what we're capable of. That's the difference. And with the insight of experience, we're better equipped than ever before to make the most of Salisbury's unbounded potential. Our progress to this point is remarkable, but it represents a fraction of what we have yet to accomplish if we remain committed to the values that brought us here. And those values are unity of vision, shared responsibility, respect, equity, and kindness, Madam Secretary. Friends, tonight's an inkwell moment. The next page in Salisbury's long history begins here. As the pen strokes of our actions become the narrative of our time, it is imperative for us to recognize that the page we write tonight will join many, many pages in our story. If our goal is the betterment of our city, then our mission will have no true end state. We're never done. Salisbury can always be safer. We can always be better at what we do. We can always work to improve the quality of life of our citizens even more than we are today. So in this moment, as we stand on the rise of the road, one Salisbury, welcoming all in the spirit of kindness and human dignity, tonight we reaffirm our solemn promise to do whatever it takes to eliminate injustice and to knock down any barrier that would keep us divided. Tonight we say again loudly and proudly that every step in our march toward progress, that every step will be taken in unison, with nothing less than absolute indifference to the characteristics that others would use to divide us: race, gender, religion. We are one Salisbury, a shining light in Maryland and in America, a beacon that says, follow me. Follow me on the path that we have lit. Follow me on a path that should be tread by every American who loves his or her neighbor as himself, by every town that wants to shed the shackles of division. So shine on, Salisbury, and the world will follow. God bless you all, and good night.